Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th MOOC of refiningisexciting.com. In this new MOOC we will talk about the hydrocracking process. Here is how this new MOOC will be structured. We will start with an introduction to precise the location of the hydrocracker within the overall refining scheme. We will then talk about the typical feeds and their characteristics. Then we'll talk about the process and the chemical reactions involved in that process. We will follow up with the rest of the hydrocracking process before talking about the operating variables. Then we will detail the fractionation section. We will logically end up with a conclusion, letting us compare the hydrocracking process with the FCC process. Indeed, these two process units are in competition to produce more kerosene and diesel fuel from the crude oil. So, I advise you to watch the MOOC dedicated to the FCC before viewing this new one. Indeed, the typical feed of the hydrocracking process can be the same as the one feeding a FCC unit. I also advise you to watch the MOOC dedicated to diesel hydrotreatment, because the hydrocracking process is quite similar to that of a diesel HDS. As an introduction, let's go back to the overall refining scheme. The typical refining scheme starts with an atmospheric distillation whose purpose is to separate the crude oil into gasoline, kerosene, and diesel fuel. These fuels are then processed into several units to improve their properties in order to meet the product specification imposed by the regulations. The balanced product of the atmospheric distillation, called atmospheric residue, is then typically processed in a vacuum distillation to continue the separation of the hydrocarbon molecules into two cuts. The first one is called VGO for vacuum gas oil, and the other vacuum residue. This VGO cut is the typical feed of the hydrocracking process. This VGO has a typical distillation range between 375 and 550 degrees C. The purpose of hydrocracking process is to break down VGO long-chain molecules to produce gasoline, kerosene, and diesel fuel. The purpose of hydrocracking process is therefore very similar to that of the FCC. At the end of this MOOC, we will see the main differences between the two processes and the reasons why a refiner may choose to invest in a FCC or a hydrocracking to boost the production of kerosene and diesel fuel. To finish this first part, we will see that the hydrocracker is like almost all conversion units, equipped with a reaction section followed by a fractionation section. This fractionation section is designed to separate the molecules that have been produced in the reaction section. As we saw in the MOOC dedicated to the FCC, in the catalytic cracking process, the reaction section is under atmospheric pressure without hydrogen and operates at around 500 degrees C. In a hydrocracker, the operating conditions are totally different, since the operating pressure will be between 150 and 200 bars, in the presence of hydrogen and at less severe operating temperatures, I mean about 400 degrees C. Here we are at the end of this first video dedicated to hydrocracking process. While waiting for the second video, don't hesitate to answer the 5 questions of the quiz. See you very soon in the second part to talk about the characteristics of the feed. See you very soon. Bye bye!